Kaya, Oxel, Lucas, Eric, and Evan.
Hi, it's Evan again. For my informative speech topic today, I'll be talking about why public transport in the United States is not as well as developed as in Europe or Asia. The widespread failure of American mass transit is usually blamed on cheap gas and suburban sprawl. In an article written by Aditi Shrikant on September 26, 2018, Why U.S. Public Transportation is So Bad and Americans Don't Care, he says North America carries the fewest rail passengers per year of any world region, only accounting for 3.7 billion of the 53 billion passengers worldwide. Ridership in Asia increased 9 billion to 26 billion between 2012 and 2017. Europe now accounts for 10 billion riders. While there are major American cities with popular public transit systems, they're often northern and coastal. The only southern city to rank in the top 25 cities with good transit system is Houston. Even though many large southern cities like Dallas, Atlanta, and even Houston have traffic congestion problems every day. Back in the 1920s, most American city dwellers took public transportation to work every day. There were 17,000 miles of streetcar lines across the country. The real reason for the streetcar's demise are gridlock and city rules that kept ticket fares artificially low. One problem was that once cars appeared on the road, they could drive on the streetcar tracks and the streetcars could no longer operate efficiently. By the 1950s, virtually all streetcar companies were bankrupt. Most companies were bought up by National City Lines, the holding company linked to General Motors. National City continued ripping up rail lines and replacing them with buses. And in the long term, GM benefited from the decline of mass transit. Also, the falling value of fares forced them to cut back on service, steadily pushing people toward the convenient, increasing affordable automobile. This information was retrieved from Joseph Stromberg, written May 7, 2015, the real story behind the demise of America's once mighty streetcars. Cars and trucks are the largest source of carbon emissions in the U.S., worsening air quality and driving climate change. America's dependence on cars also contributes to the extremely high cost of housing in urban neighborhoods that are served by transit. The most common rebuttal on why Americans don't have great mass transit is that the country is too spread out, but a look at Canada quickly unravels this theory. Looking at Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, they all have bus stops, rapid transit, and commuter rails. These locations are just as spread out as places in the U.S. and also have suburban neighborhoods and cul-de-sacs. Benefits of public transportation include reduced pollution and congestion. These go hand in hand. In a study done by David Schrank in 2003, Urban Mobility Study, College Station, Texas, congestion wasted an estimated 2.3 billion gallons of gasoline in 2003. By reducing driving, transit has a double benefit for energy savings. To start with, rail and bus travel is more fuel efficient than driving. Reduced congestion also makes automobile travel more fuel efficient. When taking public transportation, there are few auto injuries and deaths. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics estimates that motor vehicles cause over 40,000 accidental deaths and almost 3 million injuries each year. By contrast, less than 300 deaths annually take place on public transit. When transit gets people out of their cars, the result is less congestion, less pollution, and fewer accidental injuries and deaths. Principles for public transportation include reliability, as in buses and trains come every 15 minutes. Also, if more and more people continue to use public transit, you need capacity for growth. And above all, fairness. People shouldn't have to pay for another ticket for a transfer. Transfers are inconveniences and shouldn't take advantage of the people using the transit system. To increase ridership, free fare entry to the transit system attract a group of joyriders and homeless occupants. Instead of free fares, increased ridership could be increased with passes for the elderly, or students, or prepaid passes from employers or social service agencies. These passes exist in Norway, and a lot of people use them, such as students and the elderly, to take the public transit system. Transportation revenues can come from taxes or fees on driving to finance public transportation. These levies directly discourage driving and help fund alternatives to driving. Gas taxes are the staple of transportation spending in most states, but are restricted to highway and road purposes in 30 states, 22 of which are by constitutional restriction. Gas tax funds contribute to transit funding in 15 states. Other fees to implement to discourage driving could be a license, registration, and or title fee. There could also be a limit to how much car ownership growth is allowed per year, like in Singapore. Also, auto disincentives such as low emission zones in London, where cars are charged a fee for driving in a select area in order to limit pollution and traffic. Another option if people can't or don't want to use the transit system is subsidize electric vehicles and make charging stations more available. Norway has subsidized electric vehicles and there are other perks to encourage people to buy them, such as no city tolls, and there are a lot of tolls throughout the city. Also free parking, free charging, and permission to drive in bus lanes. Public transportation in the United States is a crucial part of the solutions to the nation's economic, energy, and environmental challenges, helping to bring a better quality of life. The key to great transit service is not about getting 100% of people to ride transit for 100% of the trips. It's about giving people a viable choice of getting around without needing to drive. The United States is a car-dependent society because Americans largely don't understand how transit should work and see no need to prioritize it. I take the public transportation for everyday activities such as work, going over to a friend's apartment, leaving a bar at 3 a.m. The public transportation is always running. I've only been in a car a handful of times in Norway.